All right, sit back, relax. It's time for another Laneway Talks.
Steve Lucas, welcome to Laneway headquarters, and we'd like to welcome you aboard and just go through a bit of your history and look back to where Steve Lucas has come from and where you're going. Can we go back to originally where you're from, where you grew up?
All right. Well, you go back far enough. I was a Westie. Grew up. I was Granville. Was first 5, 6, 7 years, and then moved into Ashfield, which is still western Sydney. Those days they were considered the western suburbs. Now they're called the inner west, but they were pretty vacant back then. Lived all around Ashfield, Leichhardt, Balmain, during X years, Darlinghurst, King's Cross. Then around about 83, 84 moved to Melbourne.
And why the move to Melbourne, Steve?
Because Sydney was already starting to go down the gurgler in the 80s. There were more gigs down here. I met a woman down here that I ended up marrying, and it's just more going on.
Yeah.
And for a while, half of us lived in Sydney. I lived in Melbourne. Ian and Kathy would book the Sydney gigs, I booked the Melbourne gigs, and then they came down here, and then I went back to Sydney, and we sort of worked it away. There's an old saying that familiarity breeds contempt, and that was probably very true of X. So a bit of distance between us was always for the better.
When did you start with music? At what age and what instrument? Was it guitar? Was it just singing, or was it just drums?
Voice. My paternal grandparents were vaudevillians, so they were always very musical, always singing, reciting poetry, doing routines, magic acts, stuff like that. So my own background, that was probably the feed that took me into the entertainment business, if you want to call it that. I didn't have any aspirations to be a musician. I used to like singing. I sang in school choirs, things like that, choral concerts. So if you can, leap from degenerate boy back to when I was, in primary school and high school, I was singing concerts as an alto, doing things at the town hall. But then again, Keith Richards, he was a choir boy.
And so if we go back to that, and that's interesting because my next question was going to be, what sound were you into as a young lad and whatever, and you haven't answered that, but, we've got a bit of a look at, whether it be the school choir or whatever, but what were your influences and when did they kind of start? My influences started probably at about the age of 9 or 10, and, I started to find very early on what I liked. Where did you come from, Steve?
The first single I ever bought, I can tell you that, was Stranger on a Short, Acapella. My parents were big on swing, they loved dancing. They were Golden Slipper winners, in dance competitions. So that kind of music was big for me. I loved the big band music. I loved, instrumentals and things like that. As I got older, 1964 was when Hard Day's Night came out. My mum took me to the local cinema
64
to see A Hard Day's Night, which I saw but heard very little of, because even then in the cinema everyone was screaming and shouting so much because they were so excited to see the film that didn't really take much of it in. But then I became a Beatles fan. The Beatles cartoons were on TV after school. So me and another kid that lived across the road, we'd be the Beatles. We get all the girls on the road to chase us up down the street like they did in the cartoons and stuff. And that was probably when I started to realise that music had a lot of side benefits,
Yeah. What was your first real band, as opposed to, just hacking out and doing some garage band stuff? But what was your first real band where you felt that, well, this is my thing, I'm now a musician and this is real?
When I went to Fort Street Boys High in Sydney, which is a pretty selective school, but I had 1 year in Granville High when I was about 15, and I got hooked up with a bunch of guys who were all excellent musicians, even at that age. They could play clarinets, saxophones, guitars, drums, pianos, you name it. They go, oh yeah, I can play that. And we got recruited to do a thing for the sixth formers farewell. And that was a real band in that sense. It was the high school band. And, we did everything from Cat Stevens to Jethro Tull. And I just sang in that. And that's when I went back to Fort Street after that. My friends at Fort Street said, what were you doing at Granville? I said, I was singing and doing this. By then I picked up a guitar and I played a few chords and said to my friend Ian Craig, this is how you play a G, to say, do an A minor. And then we went together.
Had you had lessons in guitar?
No. I went to one lesson. They taught me how to tune up. But waiting for my turn, there was a room full of people. I just thought, bugger this. I know how to tune it. I went home and I used to buy the Beatles songbooks and they had pictures of the chords. And so I just pushed my fingers into that and, I gradually worked it out.
Fantastic. Let's move ahead a bit and, say, what was your first taste of fame? And Steve Lucas has a name in the industry and there's a particular, you're definitely genre pigeonholed.
Yes.
Although when I listened, if I go back to X and I listened to X when X was actually happening, in the early days, I probably felt, wow, this is just out there, This is so in your face.
That's what I used to think.
Yeah.
No,
and we listen, and I listen to it now and quite frankly, it's quite sedate. But what was your first taste of fame, and where you thought, this is now my career, this is what I do, and I'm a musician, full time?
I don't know. I've never really thought about it because fame, it happens by increments. If you've never done a gig and you do a gig and there's 20 people there, and next time you walk down that street and a few people say hi, you think, oh, I'm kind of famous. But then you do another gig and there's 200 people there. You think, oh, I'm more famous. Then you do another gig and there's maybe 2,000 people eating. I'll get really well done now. So it's hard to say when I thought could say that I was famous in that respect. And I remember reading someone famous once said that if 100 people knew who you were and what you did and you didn't know any of them, then you were famous. It was one way to rate fame. Like if I can walk into Rough Trade in New York and the guys serving behind the counter go, you're Steve from X. That's famous.
I like it. And that's a really good analogy. Let's go back to before X and just say, what was happening before then and what were you doing and, where were you playing?
Well, before X, I was living in Armidale, northern New South Wales, and I wasn't doing anything. I really had no ambition at all. I still have little ambition. I've been criticised from my day-to-day mentality, but I've learned over the years that making plans is just a really good way to drive yourself insane. So I don't really make plans. I've never really made plans. My life has evolved. The music has evolved. And, I was doing nothing. I got a telegram from my friend Ian Craig, and he said, because we'd been trying to get music happening for a long time, and he said, look, new band, bring voice, and that was it. And so hopped on a train, went down to Melbourne. I'm into Sydney and back to the old school church hall where we used to rehearse, and that was Ian Ryan walked in, and that was the first time.
And that was the beginning of X.
Well, that was the beginning of X. I didn't really like it. I thought it was too noisy, and I could hear myself singing. I was having to just scream the words out, and so this is not singing, it's not fun. And so I said thanks, but no thanks. And so there was Ian Craig, Ian Ryland, Eddie Fisher, and Jeff Holmes, and myself. The Ians, Jeff and Eddie combo tried to get something happening, but it didn't work. And Jeff and Ed went one way and the two Ians stuck together. And then a fellow, John Arthurs, that we knew as Irish John, introduced Steve Cafiro to Ian Ryland. And then Ian Ryland told Ian Craig, I've got a drummer. So Ian said, well, I'll get Steve down and we've got a singer. And we got together in Steve Cafiro's basement and it sounded good. It didn't sound like the church hall thing, there were two guitars battling and all this stuff. It's still pretty raucous.
But you can feel it. When you can feel the chemistry, you can feel the chemistry.
It's clicked. That word, clicked. Chemistry, whatever you want to call it. We just were all there, the same mental attitude, the same musical attitude, and it just took off. We did one gig at the Bondi Astra. And then the next gig we did, we were supporting Rose Tattoo and Cold Chisel. And after that, it just took off.
That's a really good inauguration from the beginning, isn't it?
It was, and we did really well. We had a lot of violence associated with us in the early days. We were banned from 32 venues in Sydney consecutively, and we're still playing. But we started hiring town halls, running our own shows. We'd buy cartons of beers, sell them $2 a can, plus make money on the door.
Yeah.
We were pretty enterprising.
How did that translate to record companies? Was anybody interested?
No record company wanted to know us. Booking agencies. I mean, we got on well with the guys, I think, Nucleus, that was well. They used to book us. Harder, not so much.
So it was basically all on your own shoulders to go back to, look, basically what the Saints did in the very early days. Press your own records, whether it be vinyl or CD or whatever. Book your own gigs because they found it hard to get gigs.
Yeah.
And it really came back to the band developing their own style and their own audience, translating to the venues they had to try and make happen.
Well, yes, there's all that. And we used to go out a lot and see other bands. So if we saw a band that we really liked, we'd say, come and open up for us. And so we got consistently good shows, because we'd be handpicking our supports. Sometimes we, like I said, sometimes we work with an agency, but we hated giving money away. Ian and Steve were both, they had 10 years on me and Ian Crane. So they did prefer to deal with agencies because that's what they were used to.
Yeah.
Ian Crane and I were just young, inexperienced. We just like, fuck, why should we do that when we can do it ourselves?
Yeah.
So, it was a bit of a mix-up.
So within the development of X, were the band members exploring other avenues on their own, developing their own, their own individual careers?
No.
So it really was just X?
In the early days, especially while Ian Cray was alive, we were just X. That's all we would. There was no outside. There was no on the side bit. There was no dalliance. There was no dicking around. It was all for one for all.
Yeah.
This is the band. We picked X as an A because it was more than a name. It was a symbol that we wanted to. It's
very powerful. The word X. Yeah, I think there's a large percentage of your success comes from picking that very name.
Yeah, well, some people hate it. A lot of people hate it. What a stupid name. It's not even a name.
No,
it's a letter in an alphabet.
That's right.
It's a symbol.
So, how did it? If that was the early days, how did it then develop out into? You have many albums under your belt as an individual artist, and the other band members were very well known in Ryland.
Yeah, he'd been in Band of Light, Rose Tattoo.
Exactly, and Band of Light, and a lot of people don't even know who Band of Light were. The first Band of Light album, which he was on, to me is one of the best guitar slide albums of all time. Yeah. There's a lot of heritage there that goes with it. So as time went on, obviously everybody started to explore their own individuality.
See, the thing with X, I think that's what gave X the big difference is to have two guys that are just 19 years old playing with two guys that were 29, 30 years old.
Yeah.
They've been doing it for 10 years in the industry. They knew what they had success with. They knew what they hated about the industry. And we came along with no idea whatsoever, just going, fuck that. Let's just do this. Ian and I, two young ones, we were very rebellious.
Yeah.
Ian Ryland loved that attitude. He jumped on board with us. Steve Cafero was more of a businessman. And he kept us on the level as far as that went. But after Ian Cray died, there's all the internal dynamics shifted. I lost my best friend. And then by default, I became closer to Ian Ryland. Then we started writing a lot together. But it was hard. It was because the four-piecing was so strong. It was very hard to settle into a three-piece. We had Jeff back. We had Peter Gatonch from the Kamikaze Kids play guitars for a while.
Yeah. What about, how did you go? Did you get overseas very often?
We didn't go overseas at all. We refused to go overseas. We used to get so annoyed that bands that people treated like shit here would go to, England or London or America for 6 months, come back and they were heroes. And I thought, why? If you're any good, if you can't do it in your own backyard, then don't do it.
I've always had an opinion that Australian music and musicians are obviously as good as anybody in the world, but we can produce music as good as anybody in the world. But record companies constantly said, no, we're going to have to send you to New York or Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah, to be groomed or whatever,
Exactly. And I could never understand it because I believed so much. And that doesn't even, and I'm not just talking about the 90s or the 80s. If you go back to a lot of the albums we did in the 70s, and I'm just working on a Billy T album, which is Ross Halford and Joe Crichton and Mick Holden, and another band called Hot City Bump Band, which is from the 70s, who are a real soul funk band. But the quality of the recordings is, and the musicianship is just phenomenal. And we're back in the early 70s.
Yeah, well, this is the Australian cultural creed, it's been well documented. But we didn't want to buy into it. We didn't feel like we had to go anywhere to prove ourselves to ourselves.
Did you think you were the anti-establishment band in a sense?
We were the ultimate anti-establishment band. Oh. And even now, I go to get-togethers where they have vintage musicians, from that era of the 60s, 70s.
Let's call it heritage.
Yes, heritage. They say, this is Steve, he's the one that never sold out, sort of thing. I mean, that's the reputation that I ended up getting.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to do what everyone else is doing because everyone else is doing it. I just want to do what I wanted to do because that's what I needed to do to express myself, satisfy myself, or whatever.
I see two sides to you, one being the X, and then when I saw you play acoustically recently, it was a more, to me, a more mellow and a more, you might not like this, but commercially based as per X, which is, as we just said, totally anti-establishment. And the Chosen Few were the anti-establishment band of the 70s. And then I saw you acoustically, I go, Jesus, this is a different guy playing. It's
we're all different people.
Yeah.
We're products of our environment. Back in 77, my environment was conducive to me being very rebellious and anti. As I grew, I experienced different things. I lived with different people in different suburbs and different households, different circumstances, and some of the things that I was really angry about, I didn't feel like I need to be angry about. Some things I still feel really angry about, but like before X, like I said, I love the Beatles, I love singing music. But in 1977, there was no place to do that, and there was no need to do that, and then I desired to do it, or no one wanted to hear it either.
Yeah.
You just react to the times and react to the environment. Then there was a lot going on. Whitlam had been kicked out. We had the Fraser in the government, so there was a lot to be angry about politically. My own personal life was a mess. There was a lot to be angry about with my circumstance, with my own self, with lots of things, and that just reflected in the music. But then sometimes you can just swing the other way, like when I was doing Bigger Than Jesus, metal, sort of punk, heavy metal stuff.
Which I've got on tape from Channel 10.
Well, that's very intense.
Which we're
while we were recording that album, I got so sick of having to be that person that I went and recorded the Bread and Water, a totally acoustic album. Yeah. Because you can have so much of any one thing, and it's just like if you say, I like beer, and someone goes, for the rest of your life you can drink as much beer as you want. After a while you think, anything but beer, or what do you eat, into drug, sex, whatever. If that's all that you're allowed to have, it gets boring real quick. And with X, and it happened with Ian Ryler too, the minute that we realised that that's all we're ever going to be allowed to do in the eyes of other people, the first thing you want to do is something totally different. He did Sardine, I did whatever I did, and did stuff with Chris Welsh and Mike Couvray. We had the arm thing, did the psychedelic thing, did the metal thing, folk acoustic, techno. I've done, but not because I was chasing a fashion. It's because something intersected with my life, and I saw the value in it. I thought, I wouldn't mind having a go at that and seeing what happens, you know.
Do you ever listen to your own music? Put it on in the background?
Rarely. But I recently went to America and I spent a bit of time in Memphis. When I came back, I had a different music in me. And so I've started to record some of those ideas, and now I just listen to that. Any other music that I listen to is mainly the choice of my wife. And her musical tastes are vast. She loves everything, you know, European pop from the 60s. She loves swing, jazz, bongo music, whatever takes a fancy, power pop. Here we go. Hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of music that she's constantly just putting on in the background. And that's, you know, inspiring, because you'll hear something, you think, like, sounded up, I don't know how they did that. And then you go and start figuring out that, and then a whole new thing out yourself.
Well, what do you know, what's your opinion on the music business? People say to me on a regular basis, it must be depressing being in the music business because of the digital age. And my very kind, well, it's like a recording. My answer to that is it's as vibrant today as it's ever been. Everything you do in life revolves around music. Nothing has changed. And the music business has to change with the times, and the musicians will adapt the change. And we're in a black hole of change because we haven't come out the other end yet, and it's starting to get better, but we've been through hell in the last 10 years. But what's your opinion of the music business? Because certain people will give me an answer of, I hate digital and I'll never go there. I have my opinions, but where is yours?
It's like saying, it's easy to hate anything that's new, and it's easy to hate anything that's old and established. You know, it's easy. I think the digital age has a lot going for it, but it's just being managed not in a stable manner. Like, when CDs came out, everyone was, the CDs are shit ones, so much better. And it's not so much better or worse, they're just different. But in those days, you know, and you'd have cassettes, you know, it used to be nice to release an album, have a CD version, a vinyl version, and a cassette. It was you were spoiled for choice. The only thing I don't like about the digital age is, instead of just being another part of it, it shunted everything else out of the way because it was so cheap to purchase. But it doesn't, and the imbalance of the digital age is this: if you want to go into a studio, a really good studio, and had, you know, good mics and big, nice neat desk and stuff like that, you still have to pay the same as you did in the analog era. Now, suddenly, just because it's, you know, it doesn't cost anything to package a song, you don't have to put it in a sleeve, you don't have to put it on a piece of plastic or whatever. And so, well, because all those costs are gone, you can have it for 2 cents, you know, or 0.2 of a cent or whatever. But you still, if you want to do it properly, have your initial costs. Now, you know, a lot of people can get their little Casio out and download Garage, go ping pong ting, and get a kinky little song and sell a couple of million copies. And that's great, but not everyone wants to do that. And I don't think it should be limited to that. And the imbalance is that the audience has cheapened itself by not appreciating how much it costs or how much effort can go into creating a real piece of music as opposed to a sort of gimmicky throwaway piece of music. And I mean, they used to happen in the 60s too, or in the 50s, and you know, whatever. There's always been an element of that sort of scenario. And the only thing I hate about the digital, well, not hate, but the thing I find disappointing is that we're educating a lot of people in a bad way as far as what $1 worth is as far as a piece of art goes, you know. And music, you get called a recording artist because of the art of recording music, as opposed to the craft of recording music or a process. And it's the thing with the digital age is taking something that was handcrafted and ultimately introduced through a factory outlet is now just a production line of shit that anyone can make and call it whatever they want to. And some people say, but that's vastly liberating, and you got so much chance now because you've got all these outlets. But if you've got millions of people using the same outlets and they're making more outlets and they're making more outlets and more people coming in, how do you make yourself stand out? You know, there's no top 40 anymore. You have those really terrible video shows on TV or whatever you call them now. EMTV was the beginning of the end of music in a certain way too. Because it cheapens the brand, and you start chasing the sensational aspect of a song or the controversy of the song, and the actual art gets lost, and that's life.
Well, and talking about the art, now you may not be interested in any of this, so I'll be interested for your opinion, is what kind of equipment do you like to use? So I'm particular about, being a drummer, I'm very particular about what drums, what cymbals, what electronic kit I'm using, and everything around it. What is that something that you have any interest? Certain musicians have a lot of interest in it. Other musicians don't care. They just got their guitar and they give me the amp, and that's what I'm doing.
I used to not care, but if I'm doing something and working with a drummer, I expect that they would just have their shit together. Same as a bass player, whatever. I've got some really nice guitars.
I mean,
my amps aren't as good as I'd probably like, but.
What style of guitars do you like? What style of guitars are you into? So I always like to ask the question, the basic two question of, well, are you a Fender man or you're a Gibson man? And there's a lot of different answers why you're using either, or whether you're a Gretsch man or a Maton man. But where do you fit in?
I started off with a Fender. It was a very old Fender. Beautiful guitar.
Why Fender, Steve? Why?
Because Ian Craig, my friend that was in X that passed away, when he died, I kind of inherited it. So I had the personal connection with the guitar. So I took it on. In some ways, it was a beautiful instrument. In some ways, it was an albatross around my neck because it certainly tied me to a certain amount of pain as well as, pleasant memories. And that was the only guitar I ever really wanted to have. But then when I did my first solo album and I used White Cross as my backing band.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Peter Mather had a spare 12-string Yari and I loved the sound of that guitar, and he said, I had this one for $500. And I said, okay, I'll buy that. And for a long time I only had two guitars. I bought a Firebird, which I hated, and gave to a brother-in-law or something. But now I've got a 12-string Rickenbacker. Yeah, I don't use anywhere near as much as I want to, but I'm not playing the right kind of music at the moment. When I came back from Memphis, I came back with a 1966 Gibson, which I play every day.
Semi-acoustic? Yeah.
It lives by my bed, if I can't get to sleep, I'll just play really quietly and play my wife to sleep. Yeah. She actually enjoys, which is a blessing for me. Yeah. First thing in the morning, if I want to grab it, play a few chords. I love that guitar.
So you're not one of these musicians who has a wall full of guitars?
No, I have a lot now. I never aspired to be one, but I've got the Gibson. I've got a Dan Electro, 1957 Dan Electro, which is another fantastic guitar. Yeah. And I've got Epiphone SG, which looks like shit, but everyone goes, my God, that is a fantastic guitar. Yeah. And another Epiphone, the one like John Lennon used to use. Yeah. I've got a no-name acoustic guitar. Yeah. No, two no-name acoustic guitars. Look, if you pick up an instrument and it sounds good, it doesn't matter what the sticker says. Yes. If it talks to you and you talk to it and you have an interaction, it's a good guitar. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic.
What about on stage, with your backline and things like that? Does that worry you very much? Do you have to have, I say it like that, do you have to have two Marshall stacks there? No. Because that's what Steve Lucas said, I had two Marshall stacks behind me.
No, I don't need that at all. At the moment, I'm using an amp my brother made for me. He's been seeing me play for all my life, and all his life. So I've seen you play with a Fender, I've seen you use a Marshall, I've seen you use everything. So I built you this amp. It's 1/3 Fender, 1/3 Marshall, 1/3 Vox, and the way that it's all linked up, and you'll get that part of the Marshall, you'll get that tone of the Fender, and you'll get that warmth of the Vox or whatever. Yeah. I can't remember how you put it together. And I just run that through the speaker, and it's not a loud amp, but these days that's what monitors are for. Yeah. Yeah. You get a really big amp, you turn it up full, shit's right by, you never hear it anyway. Yeah. I used to have a Super Twin. I was never allowed to turn it up more than 2. And the biggest stages, that I could have ever played on, no, too loud. Yeah. Turn it down. Yeah. So I'd rather have a small amp and run it flat out, a big amp and not turn it on at all.
What about with recording, moving forward to the future, with recording that you'll do in the future, will it be back in the studio, or do you start to put all your ideas at home now and you're starting to do a lot of what a lot of people I know do all the basics at home now. And as you said, it's hard to get into a studio because the prices haven't changed, but the revenue generated from that music will never pay for that studio time.
Yeah. Unless you don't just think digital's a be-all and end-all of your selling capacity.
Well, that's right. And we at Laneway Music very clearly feel that the digital medium of all our artists is for the marketing of those artists because, quite frankly, they couldn't earn a living out of it because of the revenue coming from it. From there's still retail stores, digital retail stores. So you use it as a marketing tool for your live gigs and your merchandise or whatever.
I think it's really important that digital, obviously it's here. It's important to have, like you're saying, to be protected and have someone monitoring and guiding the feed out to the world. You've got to have that. But in the initial question was homes versus studio. Where do I go from here? The last single I put out, I recorded in my garage. Just ran into a Pro Tools thing. Everyone was really happy with that. There's 2 singles I did before that. One was in a studio and another was from that same session from in the garage. The difference between the studio and the garage is impossible to tell because they are 2 different bands. The thing with the studio, I think you're more aware. So you're actually kind of performing you're more with more conscience, and you're more aware of where you need it to go, and you don't waste time because the clock is ticking. So I demoed up the stuff. I gave a copy to Ash Davies for drums, Bruce Haynes for the keyboards, and Steve Hadley for bass. So this is the layout of the song. We didn't rehearse it. We went to the studio, did 1 take, 2 takes, 3rd take, nailed it. Another take, didn't use it. And it came out. When I play that record, I occasionally, especially the B-side, I love the B-side, I hear something that I really, really, really love, and I know I couldn't have done that at home. I put the other one on, but I did do it at home. It's very live rock and roll. And I think I couldn't have done that in the studio if you paid me. So it depends. What I'm working on at the moment, it's kind of got a more soul R&B vibe, and it would probably sound better if I did do it in the studio, but because it's a new feel for me, I'm better off at home demoing it endlessly until I understand my intercourse with it. And once I know that, then I'll find the right people to do it, and I'll either pay for the studio or I will do it at home because I'm comfortable there. I don't know yet. I'll see.
And just to finish up, it's hard. I never use who's your favourite artist. Who do you like listening to at the moment? And I don't care if it's from 1970, but who are you enjoying listening to at the moment?
You're my honest answer. The last, apart from today and yesterday, because my wife's been a bit sick, so she's been at home. But I've been playing Tchaikovsky, Beethoven. I was kind of sick of everything, and because I've been really focusing on the soul R&B things, I was losing my perspective. I thought I've got to wipe the slate clean.
Yeah.
I thought of, we've got thousands of records at home, and I was looking, and I was Tchaikovsky. I put it pull it out and put it on the turntable, and I could not believe how emotional I felt when I was listening to the music. Now I put a bit of Beethoven on, and thought, this is nice. Not that I have any aspirations to ever try and do anything like that. But apart from that, what I listen to is mainly, I don't even know who does it. They're just old 60s hits from France, Italy, Spain. It's kind of the garagey sort of era, not the top 40 stuff. A lot of theme music from the Italian and French movies and stuff like that. Yeah. That's always on at home in the background. Yeah. So I couldn't tell you who performed it, who wrote it. I can't even tell you who sings it, but I love listening to it.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. All right, Steve, thanks very much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, another Laneway Talks. If you enjoyed that, just search Laneway Talks for more great conversations.